Onward Storyworld is a combination of two contrasting elements, medieval fantasy and contemporary suburban USA. It's a world where elves, pixies and unicorns coexist with smartphones, air conditioning and modern vehicles. These details are explained to us in the opening of the film when the narrator, who is later revealed as Ian's father, explains how the city of New Mushroom was once full of magic, but since it was difficult to use, it was eventually replaced by the advent of technology. The modern and the magical are reflected in different aspects of the story, from Barley's interest in quests of yore to Ian's fear of driving. But more importantly, magic and the practicality of the modern world are reflected in the development of Ian and Barley's characters, as well as the nature of their journey. The first 7 minutes of the film sets up key details that reveal how Ian and Barley represent each of these dualities and influence a variety of story elements, from the principles of magic to conflict and a resolution grounded in sacrifice and self-discovery. The genius of Onward Storyworld is that its elements are intentionally designed into the characters so they can develop into deeper ideas at a later stage in the story. It's no coincidence, for example, that Ian, the character who's bestowed with a gift for sorcery, doesn't have a magical bone in his body. More of your average teenage elf, Ian's attributes and desires are designed to reflect more of the contemporary aspects of the story world. These ideas are manifested through Ian's preoccupation with things like fitting in at school and learning how to operate a vehicle. We learn that his awkward and timid nature is heavily contrasted by his fearless and self-confident older brother Barley, who appears to be the polar opposite of Ian. This is evident in everything from their difference in clothing, the way they speak, to the things that are important to them in their daily lives. While Ian is interested in keeping a low profile so he can fit in with new friends at school, Barley has more extreme and offbeat interests. He cares deeply about quests of yore, which he describes as a historically based role-playing scenario, and saving the town's historical monuments. Above all, Barley appears to have a vast knowledge about the history of their city and its medieval mythology. Barley's knowledge of medieval lore isn't random or arbitrary. It's there by design, because the story needs a character who can navigate the principles of magic, and furthermore, so specific events in the film can take place. For instance, when the boys need to find a new Phoenix gem to complete the spell, it's Barley's reference to his game, Quests of Yore, that determines where and how their journey is destined to begin. Not to mention, it's an exceptional way for the storytellers to convert exposition on a board game into a crucial element of the story world. Barley's knowledge of magical quests is also used to guide Ian and take him under his wing. Driving is a prime example of this. We know this is an important goal for Ian because the story sets up this information earlier when we see Ian creating a list of things he wants to accomplish. Since the act of performing a spell and the act of operating modern machinery are crucial aspects of Onward Storyworld, both of these elements are molded into an obstacle that directly correlates to the character's goals. When Ian struggles to resize the can of fuel, Barley tells Ian that it's not enough to say the words. In order to perform a spell, you have to feel the words from your heart's fire. In other words, you have to mean it. But in an attempt to follow his brother's instructions, he accidentally shrinks Barley down to the size of a pixie. There are two things to take away from this scene. First, that the rule of speaking from your heart's fire is deliberately designed into the story to challenge Ian's personality as a struggling communicator. And second, shrinking Barley's size makes him incapable of driving Guinevere, and therefore creates an opportunity for Ian to take the wheel and overcome his fear of driving. While Ian's enthusiasm is easily one of the most charming elements in the film, it's also used to set up the idea that his love of fantasy keeps his feet floating one step above reality. The most endearing example of this is Barley's love for Guinevere. His attachment to his vehicle amasses to the point where he's given it a name and adores its every feature as though it were a real person. Barley's attachment to the inanimate and the supernatural is the subject of adoration and well-crafted humour, but it is also a cause of concern for Ian, who has his feet firmly planted on the ground and his eyes looking straight forward. For instance, the Phoenix gem may bring back Ian's father back from the dead, but the rule is that the spell will only last until sunset the next day. And since the spell broke down midway, leaving their father's half-formed body dangling around, every minute wasted is time lost with their dad. This rule is consciously designed into the story to create urgency and raise the stakes of the goals. If Ian doesn't locate the Phoenix gem in time, he'll miss the chance to see his father, and he'll never get that chance again. This practical element of time and urgency is pitted against the hocus-pocusness of quest mythology, when Ian and Bali are forced to discuss which of the two paths they should take. Reaching a fork in the road, symbolizing the duality of the story world, Ian thinks they should take the expressway since it's faster and gives them more time to spend with their dad. But Bali rejects Ian's choice, telling him that on a quest, the clear path is never the right one. And so he insists on taking an ancient trail, known as the Path of Peril. Ian reasons with his brother, acknowledging Bali's desire to interpret their journey as one of his games, but ultimately uses the common sense of logic to win the debate. One of the subtle pieces of information to take from this moment is that logic is used to create a hierarchy in which Bali's experience of taking an offbeat trail is placed beneath the practicality of taking a straight path. And more importantly, his wisdom of medieval lore is perceived as a trivial passion that he needs to let go of in favor of more practical pursuits. We see fragments of this at the beginning of the movie when Officer Bronco tells Bali he needs to get serious about his future, instead of wasting his time with self-righteous causes like tying himself to sacred water fountains. This is the way Bali's character is intentionally set up. And it's also a direct reflection of the way Ian unintentionally perceives his older brother, like a bit of a screw-up. In a subtle way, the dual nature of Ian and Bali is used to create friction that's enhanced and escalated through the presence of magic. When Ian's novice and illegal driving leads to being pulled over by the police, Bali remembers a transformation spell that allows him to turn into someone else. The only caveat is that for every lie told, a part of your original body will reappear in place of magic. When Ian crumbles under the pressure of the interrogation, he inadvertently exposes the truth about his perception of Bali as a screw-up. And for the first time, we see Bali take offense to Ian's actions, creating a second conflict in need of resolution, which is the reconciliation of Ian and Bali's relationship. When you think about it, Onward's central conflict, embarking on a quest to rematerialize the second half of their dad's body, is both unique and symbolic of the story world that the characters inhabit. The quest, which is designed in the form of a road trip, is representative of both the contemporary and fantasy aspects of the story world. Bali, who sees the journey as a quest, is quick to interpret the directions of a map in abstract philosophical terms, whereas Ian sees things in more of a straightforward fashion. When Bali's directions lead the boys back to the place they started, Ian is quick to abandon hope, never considering the possibility that the Phoenix Gem may have been under their nose the whole time. But we get a very different reaction from Bali, who seems confused at first, but reiterates the feeling in his heart that the gem should be close by. And we see that his unshakable belief in the quest leads him right to the location of the stone, and ultimately his well-deserved moment with his father. But none of this is to say that Ian's actions, which are a consequence of his black and white world, are any less meaningful to the story. Reflecting on their failed quest, Ian uncovers his ultimate revelation, that Bali is like the father he never had. And since he has always had his older brother to look up to, Bali is in greater need of closure from their father. And just as we see a tremendous sacrifice from Bali, who willingly crashes his beloved Guinevere for the greater good of the quest, we see Ian sacrifice the chance to meet his father, so his brother can savor the moment instead. Using the quest as a channel for self-discovery, each character makes a sacrifice that integrates the practical and magical attributes they were lacking at the beginning of the story. Bali, whose relationship with his van was almost like the girlfriend he never had, chooses to confront his romanticism of his toys in favor of something more real. And Ian, who we previously described as not having a magical bone in his body, uses his newfound skill of magic to prevent Bali from missing the chance to see their dad. By using Ian and Bali to reflect two sides of the same story world, Onward creates a resolution that's fitting for each character and allows them to move forward with their lives in a healthy and practical way. And while it ingeniously sidesteps the overly simplistic idea that magic can solve all your problems, Onward's story world reminds us that beneath the mechanics of modern life, there may be a little magic in all of us. If you're interested in a detailed breakdown of Onward's ending, check out my last video that explains exactly how Ian's sacrifice creates an emotionally satisfying ending. If you love deconstructing and analysing movies as much as I do, consider subscribing to my channel. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.